I'm happy to have my friend Rafael Quesada, who's the CEO of Tower Harvest, presenting today, who's going to be talking about primarily aeroponics, the subject that I came across, just a couple of months ago, but also as a kind of subset for a larger class of technologies that are all categorized in vertical farming with recirculating water. So I'm thrilled to have Rafael here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, good stuff. Why don't we jump right into this thing? What I did was I put a slide right here just because I'm sure people could potentially be having trouble visualizing what we're talking about. So here, and I have to say, I also want to tell you one other thing, and I don't think I mentioned this when we first met, Rafael, but I have been running Two Green Energy for coming up on 3 years, and I've had at least 8 or so hundred people submit ideas, business plans for renewable energy, electric transportation, and sustainable stuff more generally. And the very first guy, when I first put out that invitation to send me business plans, the very first one was about essentially indoor farming. So using an idea like this and using lights inside and so forth and so on in an urban setting. And I remember saying, well, I didn't tell him this, but I was thinking, well, this is idiotic. I was thinking, well, we have the sun in the sky and we have the soil beneath our feet, and we've been farming for, 8,000 years or so. Why on earth would you consider a change in something like this? So my initial reaction on this thing was extremely negative, but I'll tell you what, I've come to realize that this makes an awful lot of sense. You want to just give an introduction to this?
Sure. Recirculated water farming solves a lot of the issues that have emerged as a result of expanding populations. That's really the problem that we have. The industrial age more or less led us into a growth boom that occurred not just in production of products, but consumers. So people on the earth. We just reached 7 billion people this year. Within a few decades, we're going to be at 9 billion. So within 40 or 50 years, we will put more people on the earth than existed for the course of 25 million years. So you can see the exponential rate of growth is outstripping the ability of the earth to sustain us. Presently, we are occupying 150% of the planet in terms of everything that we've made and all the people that we are and what we need to take from the earth. We need another half planet to make that possible.
Well, let me just jump in and ask, what do you mean? When you say we're occupying 150% of the planet, do you mean we're taking 1.5 times the amount of available resources? In other words, we're cutting into things like fossil fuels, the things that existed before we were here. In other words, we're using more than a sustainable amount of resources. Is that what you mean? That,
but also consider the fact that a third of the globe is starving. So, in essence, what we are doing is we are only able to sustain 2/3 of the people that we have in the current model, using the earth to farm as you described, with the sun above our heads and the earth beneath our feet. There is a need for developing another form of agriculture that is 150 times as efficient.
I see.
Literally what we have to do.
I'm with you here. So now we have a slide up here that talks about what we like about agriculture and its importance to us as human beings.
Yes.
Do you want to make any comments on this before we go on?
Sure. What we're talking about here in terms of its benefits are all the things that were removed from society after the beginning of the industrial age. People moved to cities. They removed themselves from agriculture. And at that point, the main basis of civilization was detached from society. So agriculture not only gives us sustenance and nutrition, it not only heals and strengthens us, but it connects us to the earth. One major component of the problems that the planet faces is that people are largely unaware of the effect that they're having on the earth, the negative effect that they're having on the earth, and they are not connected enough so that they're in their everyday they are conscious of the cause and effect of all the activities that they engage in. This is disastrous results that issue from that disconnect. So, for that reason, agriculture, if it can be reconnected to people, we can begin to re-civilize ourselves, develop culinary and cultural traditions again. Presently, if you go into the inner city, the culture there is McDonald's, Jack in the Box, Carl's Jr., and Wendy's. So the reality is that economy begins in the earth. That's how agriculture enabled society to develop. And what we're looking at is an economy that is so failed. We're trying to solve our economic problems using unreal instruments, speculation, the kind of Wall Street mystification of money that has caused this present malaise. And our only options, because we haven't reconnected to the earth, is to continue in this unreal pursuit of monetary increases that are unsustainable. The model for economy is to constantly grow. That's not the way the earth can support it. The earth really has to define the economy, and we do that by reconnecting people to the earth.
Okay, well, good. We have, as I recall, 3 successive slides that have to do with the problems of modern agriculture. And actually, I guess you've kind of prefaced this by saying that we desperately need a kind of, this forms, on its best day, it forms the kind of, the way in which humans interact with one another. On its worst day, I mean, we're going to show a few of the problems. I just also wanted to mention to the audience that there is a sidebar on the left. If you have any questions, please write them in, and we'll take them at whatever point. Certainly, if as appropriate at the end of the show here. As a matter of fact, we have one about the difference between aeroponics and hydroponics. I happen to know that we're going to deal with this. There is a slide that deals with this. So, Raphael, when we get to it, just make sure that we're abundantly clear on how all of these related technologies interact with one another. So let's just get right into some of the problems associated with what we've done here over the last, I say, 150 years, but certainly over the last few decades.
I'm ready.
Yeah, fire away. You see slide 5 there, but there are problems.
Yes.
Okay, good.
So we've touched on the human and animal populations exploding. Animal is critical because it affects our ability to manage land. And the animal population, we're talking livestock, it has exploded in parallel with human expansions. So the industrialized agricultural models, which we touched on a minute ago, has created problems in that industries managed in large part by corporations, often multinational corporations that don't exist in any one place, are forced to find solutions for this 150% occupation of the earth that we have presently reached, and they're doing it through synthetic means. So a lot of it is based in petrochemical, synthesized fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, which exacerbate the problem while they create a false sense of security. So the corporations are meeting their profit needs, but it's at the expense of the planet. At present, we have outstripped the Earth's ability to sustain us, but more importantly, the Earth has reached a point of limit where it has been exhausted, and the Earth needs to rest. So the biggest problems occur in freshwater supplies, where we have polluted or poisoned the fresh and seawater worlds that originally enabled life, and the way that water goes, so go we. The situation in the oceans is unacceptable. The seas are literally asphyxiating our fisheries. There is a very current NOAA report that was written by my brother-in-law, as a matter of fact, who is a top scientist at NOAA. His name is Dr. Eric Prince, where what has been found is the extent of dying seas is presently reaching a point where it's going to bridge the distance between Africa and Brazil. That type of death, what we're talking about is the loss of oxygen in the water. So pelagic fish that migrate from one part of the globe to the other, depending on season, are not able to go through it because they suffocate. And what's causing that is the extent of nutrient, heavy petrochemical, super synthesized nutrients that are washing into the sea as a result of multiple issues pertaining to erosion, pertaining to the way that they're sprayed on crops, industrial agriculture, overuse of these substances. And what it's done is it's created new types of algal blooms in the sea. And these algal blooms suck the oxygen out of the water so that when fish go into it, they die of hypoxia, which means suffocating for lack of oxygen in the ocean. So our problems are legion. They all issue, or many issue from the sacred cow, which is our food supply. And as a result, the onus is on us as humans, as the manipulators of the planet's resources and the biggest presence on the face of the planet, to bring solutions to bear that reverse these problems and allow the Earth to rest. So back to your initial question as to why do we have to go underground? Why do we have to grow food indoors if we have the sun above us and the Earth beneath our feet? The reason is because the Earth is tired, and it's causing the Earth, this exhaustion is causing the Earth to go into a kind of a haywire state where we're seeing, if you're conscious, a lot of people don't even notice this because the effects are incremental and very, very small, but if you've been watching the Earth since the 70s, as I have, what you notice is that the climate is changing. Weather has gone to extremes. We're suffering the kinds of effects that are mentioned in biblical terms, and we're still blind to it in large part. Probably 1 in 10 people are aware of what's going on, and it's very difficult for that small number to move the big mass. So it has to happen through leadership, and leadership needs to bring us to a more sustainable agriculture, and this is what is accomplished by recirculating water agriculture.
Okay. Well, I've put up this other slide that gets at some of the other issues associated with our modern, Food Inc., agribusiness approach to putting food on our table. One of which, obviously, is this deforestation, the hacking down of the Amazon rainforest to make places where cows can be raised for McDonald's, et cetera. So, and as you note here, there are other issues as well.
Right. The increasing aridity and desertification, this has to do with the migration patterns of humans toward metropolitan centers, urban core. Since 1950, for example, and we're talking here Canada, U.S., and Mexico because we're all tied together through the treaty. But in, for example, Canada, 2/3 of all people live in 8 urban centers. In the United States, 80% of us live in urban and suburban centers. And in Mexico, 2/3 of people have moved to cities compared to 1950 when it was reversed. 2/3 lived in rural centers. What this causes is the need to expand living spaces in high concentrated urban centers that are mostly concrete and asphalt covered, which adds a lot of heat into the atmosphere, and by so doing contributes to desertification, which means literally that land is moving from the type of environment where greenery can grow to the type of environment that can't sustain greenery. And so we have deserts surrounding our cities, and this is a huge problem. It's exacerbated, again, by this false economic principle that we follow, which is you raise the price of your land by its proximity to the city. But that land is still the same land that it was. All we're doing is we're driving up the rate of exchange for it, making few people wealthy, who are then able to access some of the luxuries that we've mistaken for civilization. And the net result for the rest of the planet is that we have devalued and devolved the Earth's ability to sustain life.
Okay, so, but before we leave this one, why don't you talk a little bit about? Can you see that I'm encircling this thing? I don't. Okay, good. So, you told me when we first met that this is essentially a vicious circle associated with our need to become more and more aggressive in terms of the types of chemicals we're using. In other words, that as certain of these pests evolve to become more resistant to what we're doing, we're simply amping up the toxicity, thus increasing the rate at which we're ruining the Earth's soil. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes. Well, I mean, agriculture involves livestock and the way that they graze, and livestock grazes. It also is the industrial agriculture. So we're talking all of this is industrial agriculture of food products that are grown in the earth and food products that are livestock. All of these combine as a result of the need for industry to feed more and more people. So what occurs is in the industry, because it's profit driven, there's a lot of monocropping, which is the corporation deciding there are certain foods that it's going to focus on at the expense of the soil, which really requires rotated crops that replenish the nutrients. So monocropping destroys the earth. The overgrazing of animals, when you have an overabundance of animals. I don't know if anybody's ever driven up the interstate in California, but you go through a place where the immense number of cattle are so far out of proportion with the Earth's ability to sustain them that the resulting stench is almost unbearable. You have to close your windows, turn off recirculating air, and hope that you can drive through there without getting ill. This is indicative of what happens to the earth as a result of over production of livestock. The grasses are eaten. The earth is eroded. The same thing happens alongside of it, where the agricultural plant growth is no longer able to sustain itself so a lot of dust and erosion occurs, dust blowing soil away, and erosion occurs when water hits that infertile earth. And so what the only option that the industrial model has is to use petrochemicals as a very powerful way to refertilize the earth. So what they're doing is they're using petrochemical synthetic fertilizers, which then amp up the ability of the earth to grow shrubs and weeds alongside of the plants that they're trying to grow for our sustenance. Mm-hmm. And these larger weeds require heavier herbicides. It also invites, unhealthy foods invite insects, and so you need more pesticides and stronger pesticides. Well, they do this by amping up the power of synthetic petrochemical pesticides. So now you have all these products that are being developed out of petroleum, which is on its other side adding to our climate problems through the processing of petrochemical products. And it's, as you described, a vicious circle that winds up depleting our ability to grow foods, depleting our ability to sustain our livestock, and requiring us to use more synthetic means to replenish the Earth's life-enabling powers. But what we're doing is killing the Earth by feeding it its own product in high concentrations. So, okay.
Well, good. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I did want to just make sure we have one more slide on problems, and then I want to get into solutions and allow time for questions. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but if you want to just speak to,
sure,
finish up what you were saying, and then just move on to this, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. So, in terms of industry giving us false solutions, GMOs, genetic modified organisms, on which it's presently relying, are creating problems for us. Let me just say, I don't know if anybody knows this, but Monsanto now has a $2 million fund that they are using for this year alone to push GMO into the mainstream. So there's a movement afoot that will require industry to label foods as GMO, and they're going to be fighting that tooth and nail because they know that genetic modified foods are a big turnoff to people, and rightly so. We don't know what the net effect is of GMOs, and the question arises, why do we have to? And the answer is because of the overpopulation and the inability of plants to withstand the destruction that industry has created on the earth. And so industry is trying to make that up to us by providing these false solutions. The industrial processing and preserving of food, all of this is part of the depletion of food biodiversity and the access to real foods, where we wind up with food in the supermarket. Essentially, it's dead. We're looking at food that has been gassed and preserved, a lot like we do with bodies in the morgue, and it looks like it's a living food, but it's not. The long-term effect of choosing crops that are going to travel well is that we're getting not full nutrition in the places where people live, and so we wind up with a lot of disease. There's obesity, diabetes 2 in children. In children as young as second grade, we are seeing the results of a failed industry that maintains a grip on what we're able to do and does it far away from where people live. So this is what we're trying to turn around.
Good.
The problem is also articulated into the livestock. Just yesterday, there was a report of mad cow disease again found in California cattle. So there was one cow, that's true, but the fact is that this indicates that this problem persists. It was a dairy cow. Supposedly, milk can't transmit mad cow disease yet. I think it all has to do with the strength of disease as it grows in direct proportion to the depletion of the Earth's ability to control itself. Mm-hmm. So we see this all the time. Mm-hmm. So it is aeroponic, hydroponic, aquaponic, and bioponic, which leads us out of this problem and into solutions. And largely, it's because it's the kind of solution that allows food to be brought back to where people are, the way that agriculture began. This is essential to allowing the earth to rest and giving people access again to the kind of food that generates their health from the inside out. We have, as I indicated earlier, a lot of economic problems that have never been solved. South Central Los Angeles, Watts, Inglewood, Compton, these cities still bear the scars of deprivation and impoverishment that date all the way back to the Emancipation Proclamation, to the 1860s. So that's a whole other story, but it's real. There's
yes, I can see that.
A genuine solution to that problem. But we can solve those problems with real economy. By that I mean starting economies from seed, where the long-term effect is that we develop health and nutrition from the inside out, culinary tradition, which leads to culture, more vibrant communities that are self-involved, not self-destructive, self-involved in generating productivity, because you inculcate the earth back into people that have had it deprived from them.
I see. Okay.
So
let's get into this thing let's get into this as a set of solutions. And as we've already had a good question on this thing, and I just want to make sure that I and everybody listening understands this. We've had, for instance, hydroponics since I was a kid. I presume this is a kind of an ancient technology, but can you quickly define the difference between these four technologies that I'm circling right here?
Okay. The hydroponic method dates back to the 1600s. Somebody put some mint into water, and it was fine. Somebody put some mint into dirty water, and it flourished. So it's been known since then, and plants like mint, which are really robust, reacted very well to it. It wasn't really developed into a science until the 30s at one of the UC campuses, and the first plants that really thrived with it were tomatoes, and it caught on at that point. But it never really got out the ground because there was a lot of development that had to occur with respect to understanding how nutrients are formulated for hydroponics. And so it doesn't really make its entry into any significant numbers until the last 15 or 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so hydroponic is now a very sophisticated methodology. It is the basis for everything. Hydro means water, and ponic means work. And so all of these processes come out of hydroponics. Hydroponic is a method that immerses roots of plants in water that is nutrified, and that allows the plant to grow. The aquaponic is a combination of water culture, aquaculture, which is fish, that is used to feed plants, and plants in turn filter the fertilizer out of the water and aerate it and send it back to the fish pure. So it's creating a system that maintains itself much like the Earth does. The aeroponics.
That's this thing in the lower left, correct, Raphael? So in other words, this thing with a fish, right?
Yeah, that's fish feeding plants. Plants cleaning the water for fish so that they thrive. Fish won't grow in dirty water. They'll stay fingerling size. And so to move them from small fry to something that you can actually use for food source, the water has to be maintained pure, and the plants enable that. Adding some biomedia filters that are employed as well.
Okay.
And so that's aquaponic. And then the aeroponic is a refined approach that has that started out as not a passive but an active agent of providing nutrient and water to plants, that was forced through high pressure hoses onto the roots of plants, giving the plants oxygen through the atomization of the water, and the results were wonderful. But it requires a lot of machinery, and it's not so it's labor intensive, and it's not so energy conserving.
You're talking about aeroponics?
Aeroponics in its earliest forms, and
I see. Okay.
Aeroponics,
which we define then as what exactly? So here we say that it's an automatically controlled mist, which is a mixture of air, water, and minerals.
Right. It's a lot more oxygen in terms of what the plant is given during its growth cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So aeroponics is the real goal of aeroponics is to allow the plant to take its air, water, and nutrient in the proportions that it wants and let it decide based on the growth rate that it wants to take. So if you can create an environment for the roots that gives the plant everything that it wants, the plant is capable of making its own decisions. In fact, it's programmed to make those decisions, and there's no guesswork. The plant makes all choices and then thrives. The growth rate is 2 to 4 times as fast, and that's largely the result of the plant's ability to access everything that it needs.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
And now, and the bioponic is a system yet being developed that creates the basis for plants to benefit from all of the above, and also be in a nutrified soil media that has been developed to its highest productivity through the use of naturally occurring agents that are stored in a media. And we do this with a substance called biochar, which is a high-level charcoal, not the type of charcoal that is used for fuel or that is used for barbecuing, but rather a very high-level charcoal that is the result of very slow burning with very small amount of oxygen, so that the result is a harder, much denser, and a charcoal that has much more surface area to absorb water and nutrient. And added to a media, when I say a media, I'm talking about, it can be dirt, but it can also be simple types of coconut hair and different types of pellets, even some ceramic, which are clay-like, that once mixed with biochar become very fertile and get more fertile with each growing season. So you wind up having to use less and less nutrient, less and less water, because it's all stored in the bio media.
Okay. Well, let's move on to this thing about aeroponics and make a couple of points here. I wrote yesterday, I'm fond of saying that there's no such thing as a free lunch. So we talked for 20 minutes here about the horrors of agribusiness and where we've gone over these last few decades in terms of feeding the world's people. But here you have, the first time I looked at this, I said, well, there's a piece of plastic. I don't like plastic because it comes from petroleum, and it's got a plug in it. That means it's, you're plugging it into an outlet, and you're drawing electricity that's, 48, 49% coal. Then I realized that, well, first of all, you can make this. Let me just put up this next slide for a nice, this drawing here, this rendering here of this tower. This can be made out of bioplastic, obviously. And the pump in this thing is 17 watts, and it's not on all the time. It's like a week before you use a kilowatt hour of electricity. It's an extremely. It's true that there's no such thing as a free lunch, but this is fairly close to that, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really a low consumption though. It's actually 0.02 amps. So it's more like 4 watts for the small one. The larger one is more like when you go to, let's say, 11 pots high. This is a 5-pot model that's shown here, but an 11-pot high goes to maybe 10 watts. So, and it's only used intermittently. So right. there's a lot of non-usage time that diminishes the consumption rate of wattages when you're thinking about them.
Yes. This, by the way, if I could just interrupt and talk to this one here on the left, this is taken from Chicago O'Hare's website, I think. Isn't this the one from...
No, this is actually a greenhouse, but it's not unlike what's happening at O'Hare.
Okay.
They're very similar.
Okay.
So when you say it's like O'Hare, it's just that they're taller. O'Hare has tall towers done that way as well.
Oh, okay.
So,
but when you think about it, you think of how many restaurants there are in O'Hare Airport serving, Caesar salads and so forth. That's really quite a display there. I mean, obviously it's a drop in the bucket compared to feeding 7 billion people, but the fact that this can be done so readily, I think, serves as a kind of beacon of hope, if I may sound so optimistic.
There's no question. It's a solution whose time really has come. We were talking about the problems, and I should mention to you that the cost of food is tied directly to petroleum cost. So the industrial models make use of mechanization, all sorts of plus the production of pesticides and herbicides. So to get food to the table, it costs more. And as oil prices rise, and they're constantly rising now, the cost of food increases. So to be able to farm food locally where one is better just on that basis. You have eliminated that component of the supply chain, which is delivery. Plus, you have increased the diversity of food that you can grow because it's not so sensitive to the need to be transportable for 14 to 21 days before it hits the market.
Right.
So you have food that you can grow and stays fresh for 4 to 5 weeks, refrigerated, and it's diverse because you didn't have to truck it. The other conserving aspect of this is when you consider, for example, water that's used for agriculture in California. All of it has to be pumped from distant locations, the Colorado River, the Russian River, the places where we get water. So even before it's pumped into the food areas where we're growing our nutrition, it has to be moved. So there's a huge amount of energy that's consumed. I think it's 2/3 of California's energy requirements is just moving water. A large part of that is, agriculture uses 70% of all freshwater reserves. So 70% of that 2/3 is agriculture.
Yep, that's about half. It's amazing. Here's the last slide on this set of technologies. Do you want to take us through this?
This is a high concentrated hydroponic that we've developed that allows us to grow 15 plants per square foot. So when you think about an acre of land, what you're growing is 9,000 to 22,000 plants per acre, depending on crop type. When you go vertical, you increase that amount by the number of levels that you establish. So what you're looking at there is just one module. We can go 10 high with that and increase by 150, make it 150 plants per square foot. This is not possible to do with square foot farming, if you will, where it's length by width. It's only possible to do when you increase the amount of real estate by creating land in thin air through the vertical use of terraced type of farming. And so it's really as high as you can get with your picking gear. That's how high you can go with it. And in a warehouse situation, you can see the results.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've never understood this. I would think that the amount of effective light, in other words, you need photons incident on leaves. Obviously these things cast shadows. You don't get full sun except unless you're the guy at the top. Isn't that correct?
No, it's got its own lighting built in. It doesn't have to be outdoors.
I see. Now, you told me something else. In other words, if this is indoors, most of the spectrum that comes from the sun, even the part of the spectrum that's visible light, and certainly the stuff that's infrared or ultraviolet, most of this stuff is completely incidental to the plant. The plant is looking for certain parts of the spectrum in the red and blue areas, right, and the rest of it is meaningless, correct?
Yes. Red and blue is really the primary spectrum that it wants and plant life wants. And there is one part of that which is called invisible red, which is what occurs when a plant is shaded. It grows faster because it's looking for that red and blue. So a plant can grow leggy when a seedling is being propagated. It can grow leggy as a result of not having access to that to the light it needs. The same effect occurs when plants are shaded in a forest cover, for example. So the reality is the plants are using red and blue mostly, and affected by those frequencies.
Okay. So in other words, LED lighting of precisely those frequencies would be could be very effective and kind of efficient as well. I see. Okay, well, that's interesting. All right, well, this has been unbelievable. If there are any other questions, we'll certainly take them at this time. I just wanted to say this in closing, that you may be wondering, I try to make Two Green Energy as relevant as I can to the business audience. I guess the mantra here is that if all of this stuff is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry over a period of time, just in terms of renewable energy alone, not to mention all the other ancillary clean tech issues like aeroponics being a wonderful example. But if all of this is true, it certainly seems like a fertile ground, pardon the pun, for a great number of people to enter. And so when I come across something like this, I'm always wondering what's the business model? How can Two Green Energy play a role in this? How can the tens of thousands of people who visit twogreenenergy.com every month, what are their potential involvement as entrepreneurs, as investors, etc.? And the answer is I'm not sure here. I've just come across this recently. There are a million possibilities in terms of how to take this to a very large and increasingly aware market that our current modes of feeding the world's population are completely unsustainable. Even the wealthy are struggling with skyrocketing rates of childhood cancer and all the other horrors associated with the fact that we're not taking very good care of ourselves in terms of what we're putting in our bodies. And there's every day there's an increasing rate of acceptance of this sad fact, and therefore an increasing appetite for worthwhile solutions, of which aeroponics is one. I guess I'm asking a question here. In other words, what's the business model? I'm not sure, but I'm sure there are 3 or 5 or 50 that are going to make sense here. And if anybody's interested in speaking with Raphael or me about that, so please don't hesitate to call to contact us. We have a question here about the last slide. It appears to show some sort of lighting above the plantings. Can you explain? So this is in fact a kind of representation of what we were just talking about, right, Raphael? The fact that this could be, you could do this indoors with, for instance, LED lighting or what. I mean, it doesn't have to be LED, I presume. But is that correct? Yes,
there's various. I didn't hear the question, though, Craig.
In other words, what this picture right here, and I'll go back to it, depicts lighting in these rows right around here.
Yes.
And we were just talking about this. This is obviously just a rendering, but has the potential to be, LED lighting at certain frequencies and so forth.
Yes, there's all of that's possible. We're going for economy of pricing in relative to the production and the startup costs. We're trying to use the least expensive solution, and LED is still fairly expensive, but there are some places where it really is called for.
Right.
So there's this type of solution is necessary in places where people live and it's either too hot or too cold to support agriculture, and there's no access to fresh foods.
Right.
So you can imagine if we're going to expand to 9 billion people, there's going to be a lot of those places that emerge. So these kind of solutions need to be developed. So we're at the forefront of that. We have systems that can be used in that manner. And a big part of it, of course, is how you develop the nutrients, because plants require different foods at different times of their growth cycle. And a minute ago, you were talking about the opportunity. Well, given the growth that is projected and the problems that have been caused by putting food production so far away from where people live, the opportunity really is to grow with the healing of the earth. Now, that's a beautiful thing if you think about it. In other words, we have to stop creating wealth by practices that destroy the earth, right, and start creating wealth through practices that heal the earth and heal ourselves, and rightfully so.
Yep. Well said. Do me a favor. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that, the opportunities are, we've already broken ground on the opportunities. We have the first supermarket rooftop farm in the world, which I can't speak to in particular because the corporation that we're working with is reserving the right to announce that, and it will be announced at some point in May when they're going to coincide with an event that they're giving. It's the first in the world that I've been able to find in a month of researching, and there's a lot of people growing plants on roofs for purposes of insulating and keeping heat out and making the spaces inside more comfortable. But the idea of growing food on a rooftop for a supermarket where it's a zero carbon footprint is quite new. And
yeah.
so there are other companies out there that are in negotiation and so forth, but we took the active approach of setting one in place, and the supermarket interest is very happy with results so far, and the planned expansion is going to be monstrous. So when you consider just the existing supermarket infrastructure that can be accessed with this business model, the opportunities are huge. And we are looking right now into the whole Pacific Northwest, into the Midwest, and on the East Coast for access to those existing infrastructures. And then there is the question of the food deserts. And these are areas that the USDA has identified as places where fresh foods simply do not exist and where grocers will not go.
Right.
So we have a dual approach to solving that problem. And I don't know anybody else of our competitors that has a conscientious effort in that respect. So I'm very proud to announce that we are installing the first learning center in a high school in West Los Angeles at Westchester Enriched Sciences Magnets High School that will teach all of these systems that we've been talking about to high school students, even as the model is being recreated on other supermarket rooftops, which is our prime model. And the people we are training, these teams who are the next generation, will be those who go and man these farms and become career-driven in the field of urban agriculture, which has never existed before. So we're literally bringing a reconnection to the earth in the city using people who have never imagined that they could have a career with food provisioning, and that's the thing that we're going to do. But more importantly, we're going to take those teams into the food deserts where grocers don't go, and I am predicting that it's a larger marketplace than is being served by grocers who concentrate on the 1, 2, and 5 or 10 or 15% of people who can afford to buy foods that cost at the price that they're bought. Fully 85% of the marketplace is out there.
All right, very good. Listen, we're kind of running out of time, and there are a couple other questions, so I'm wondering if you could do a couple of things for me quickly. First of all, we have an excellent question, and shame on me for not making this a clear slide on this thing, but can you talk about the nutrients? So in other words, what are these nutrients? You've told me a little bit about it, but please explain this very briefly to the audience.
Well, very briefly, there's about 52 micronutrients that plants choose from. There are 8 that are essential.
That are elements, right? Now, these things, they're not compounds, they're elements. They're things like, magnesium and potassium. Obviously, you have potassium and nitrogen and phosphorus, but these are other elements, correct?
The combination of them are chemicals, minerals, and organics. All of them are the same thing, so we just call them micronutrients.
So give me an example, just reel a few off. What are the 8 or 10 most important?
Well, we're running short of time. I'm going to talk about one, phosphorus. Phosphorus is a limited resource that is running out. We probably only have 50 to 60 years left of it on the earth, and we need to find a solution to that. But obviously nitrogen, the potassium, the phosphorus, all these kinds of substances, which are chemical expressed out of minerals, sometimes out of organics. These are all the processes that the earth normally takes time to produce. In the case of what we're doing, we get to select what we want for the different types of crops that we're growing. And using that basis, there is now an encyclopedic reference to what plants require at what time in their cycle they require it. And so we have developed a way to access that and provide exactly what we need in water-soluble substances. So instead of waiting for the earth to produce the micronutrient over the course of months or sometimes even years, we're able to do it instantaneously and give the plant what it needs at the time, as it's growing, at the time that it needs it. So our production is increased, our food flavor is increased, so sweeter strawberries, juicier tomatoes, flavorful tomatoes, better cucumbers, better peppers, all of this that industrial agriculture gives us in cardboard tasting food comes back to life. This is what is going to spur culinary and cultural tradition.
That's great.
And this is what makes civilization. So the nutrient is simply water soluble, everything that the earth provides, but we're making it organically through means that make it instantly available.
Okay, good. Now here's a good question, and I ran across this the other day. I didn't know anything about this. What about fruits that like cherries or apples or lemons or so forth that grow on trees that are dozens of years old? How does this apply to fruits like that?
Yes, it does, and we're making that possible. This is, I can't delve into it, but we are going to make that possible to do in the urban core, on rooftops and in spaces that may not have soil, but we're going to be able to provide that as well. Presently, we have obviously access to soil that we can in the city that hasn't been used, so we're still enabling that. I'm just saying that we're going to be able to do it with the same high productivity, water solubility that we are doing with the high level foods like lettuces and herbs. We're going to be able to do that with the woody foods, which are like apples and pears and berries, bush types that don't take instantly to hydroponic.
Okay. Now, here's a question about economics. Granted this is brand new and that you're one of the, pioneers in this thing, so this may be a question that's too early to answer, but have there been demonstrations of economic viability on this thing? In other words, the people, the grocers who are now putting this on their roofs or, any other combination of for-profit entities.
Let me give you an idea. In New Orleans, my associate Doug Jacobs and his group AMPS has assembled an aeroponic farm in a farm called Holly Grove Market and Farm. The food that is being produced on these towers is far superior to what's being able to be grown in the earth for several reasons. Earth-grown food is subject to earth-burrowing insects. We don't have that problem. Our food looks better, it tastes better, and it doesn't require any kind of pesticide. We do have issues that we solve with soaps and so forth because of the very tropical kind of environment that Louisiana has. But the bottom line is our food sells before the rest of the food sells, and we just wish we had the wherewithal to have expanded that and created an acre worth of aeroponic. Right now, we're growing about a half an acre in a space that's about 8 times 25? It's about 160 square feet, a bit more. So we would like to be able to increase that exponentially, and so I just want to put this out there. We're open to people with ideas for funding capability that will allow us to deploy and become the farmers in all these urban settings where we can access the opportunity that's simply waiting for it to be taken.
Very good. Listen, thanks very much, Raphael. This has been fantastic. I had quite a number of comments from the audience that said this is extraordinarily interesting and other similar remarks. And we are out of time, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. I'm sorry that we couldn't have gotten to some of these other comments and questions. By the way, in terms of the patents on this thing, certain of these things are patented, but I think anybody can see that there's certain things that you can't patent, and certainly the concept of aeroponics generally, or the fact that this is the nutrients fall down from gravity. I don't think anybody can actually patent gravity.
Right.
Unfortunately.
This is true.
So be this as it may, I guess the answer is that it's a complex question, but a good one nonetheless. I'm afraid that's all the time we have, and I want to thank you very, very much, Raphael. This was fantastic, as I knew it would be, and let's talk again soon, okay?
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.